Moz, where were you last week?
I was down at the Goulburn Police Academy, going through a program which is an initiative by New South Wales Police Commissioner Karen Webb, to get you down there and do some things where you go through the paces of what young cops have been trained to do. We got to go and skid cars. There was a police chase, although they wouldn't let us drive. But the really wild thing was they put you in a simulated exercise where there was a person with mental health and you had to try and talk around them, right? And Benzie and I, Matthew Benz, another reporter from the Telegraph. So we're gonna go into this room and see what we're confronted with. And we had Glocks and that capsicum spray.
Yeah.
No, why it's not capsicum. It's got nothing to do with capsicum. Anyway, so Benzie and I, you'd hear the people beforehand. You hear this screaming and then occasionally hear this bang, right? So we're talking about how we'll go in there, Starsky and Hutch will be fine, although they both had hair. And so we went into this room, not very prepared, for all of a sudden there is this woman screaming, "Go, I'm going to kill me, I'm going to kill you." And I was so good, I couldn't get the capsicum spray. Apparently I squealed like a girl. Benzie was just as hopeless.
Yeah.
And eventually, while I was trying to get the gun, Benzie shot her.
Bang.
Bang.
Like that?
Just like that.
Wow.
Very close range. And even now, what everybody said is just, you had no idea, unless you're in that situation, how you react, right? And it was just, I knew that the knife was plastic, but I just, in that moment, I just found out how useless a policeman I would have been. That's why I became a journalist. And I'm a pretty good, I'm not useless journalist.
No, you're all right. What did the Commissioner think of your performance?
I thought they had to pick her up off the floor from laughing. No, I'm serious. Because they were watching from this observation deck and serious, everyone was just pissing themselves. Really humiliating. It's all caught on film that you haven't got hold of yet, but I know you're trying hard.
So instead of doing the podcast last week, you went and humiliated yourself.
Yeah.
Clem did all right.
Yes, okay, she did. I thought it was really well, and I'd forgotten the Walter Marsh story, which again, a horrible murder.
Yeah.
And it's one that reflects it was a person, a nurse, basically. But yeah, no, she did very, very well. You two seem to get on okay.
Yeah, we've worked together for a long time. She's good fun. I just wanted to ask you, I know it's been making headlines across the country for a while now, but Lilie James, where does that sit for you? I've said repeatedly, I think it is one of the worst incidents I've had to cover. It's as bad as it gets, and it highlights how dire the domestic violence situation is in Australia right now. But where does it sit for you? What did it remind you of?
For the way the city has reacted, if not Australia, it's up there with the Anita Cobby murder, which you again weren't born. It was 1986, and it is still to this day the most horrendous thing I've ever covered. And it resonates with me because it ended up, I hate to say it launched my career, and that's a horrible thing to say, but Anita Cobby was a 26-year-old nurse, worked at Sydney Hospital. She was a beauty queen. For charity. Mm-hmm. She was this, not just stunning looking. There's a photo taken a week before she died by a professional photographer who was just bedazzled by her smile walking through the city. And this photo, this beaming woman, became synonymous with Anita Cobby. She's caught a train home after dinner with some friends from the city to Blacktown, where she was living with her parents. She just was having a trial separation with her husband, John, who was also a nurse. It's a warm February evening, and I remember she had about 2 miles to work, 2 kilometres, miles, it depends. Back then, I think it was miles. Anyway, there were no cabs, and she normally would ring her dad to come and collect her. Gary Lynch was his name, and she couldn't. All the phones had been vandalised; they were all broken. So she started walking, and about not only a few minutes after she was walking down this street in Blacktown, a car pulls up. There's 5 guys in it. She's dragged in. And then the reports are there's a woman missing, John Cobby, who, even though he was separated, he got a phone call saying the next day from Gary Lynch, Anita's father, saying she's missing. Anyway, and the story goes out there's a nurse missing, and what eventuated was her body was found about 3 days later, February 4. She went missing. It was 2 days later, found in a paddock nude. Her throat had been slashed. Sorry, I've seen the photos. And her finger's broken. Anyhow, a manhunt went on for 3 weeks to find out what had happened. John, the city went crazy. Here was this beautiful woman, and the injury, somebody got hold of the autopsy report, John Laws, and he read part of it on radio. And as I said, the city went nuts. Just find these horrible killers. Murderers were ringing up cops saying, let me find them first. And then about 3 weeks later, they found the guys that did it. There were 5 of them. There were 3 brothers. The leader was a guy called John Travis. I remember going to Blacktown Police Station when they'd arrested one. There were probably 300-400 people there. The cops were driving in. They were rocking the car. There were nooses being thrown over sides of buildings saying hang them. As I said, you can't really comprehend what happened. It was wild. I know I spoke to one of the coppers in the car. He said, I thought it was going to crash. Anyway, that was the story. And a bit later, I got to talk to John and Cobby, the husband, who said that first night after they found the body, he said, I think a copper pushed me up against the wall and said, you did it. And he said, in my mind, I blame myself for not being with her. I said, yes, I did. He broke down. He was, anyway, he was a lovely man, but within months, he was on smack.
Heroin.
Heroin, yeah. He changed his name. So, and then, we're still friends today. Well, I eventually wrote his book. He changed his name for 30 years, lived under a different name. He said he used to dye his hair purple because he scared people were looking at him. He went overseas, he hid, he tried to kill himself. So that story, when innocence meets evil, and that was the penultimate case. And this story, Lilie James, is very similar. Here is an innocent person who obviously just wanted to give to the community, taken out by pure evil. So that's where it took me.
So you wrote the book on Anita Cobby.
Yeah, and I covered the court case too, which was the whole city, like these 5 animals, as everyone called them. And I know there was an old court reporter up there called Joe Morris, who he was nearing 80, and he wouldn't retire. So I mean, so the court case was huge. It was up at old Darlinghurst Court. Old Joe Morris was there. He'd supposed to retire at 65, but they gave him the gold watch, and he just turned up the next day still at court. And the young court reporter's going, he's going, piss off. This is my court. And then eventually got back to, I think it was Rupert or one of the bosses, said, just leave him, give him 3 days cash. So he stayed as a court reporter. So Joe was there covering it with me, and it was massive. There were metal detectors, and I remember Anita's husband, the cops really checked him over because he was trying to kill these guys. But old Joe, and we go in there to cover it, Joe wouldn't take a note. And then we had the next thing. You go out, and we filed on the phone, and he'd go out and he said, I filed everything. And I go, he didn't take a note. And then I found out he was having an affair with the court stenographer. And he made her, she'd just give him the transcript and he'd just read it out. Because I was thinking, I'd read it in the paper, word perfect. And I said, and that was Joe, because Joe had been at courts for so long. He also parked. He had a car spot, which judges couldn't get, inside the Darlinghurst complex.
Wow.
And one lunch break, he goes, come out here. And we go out. He opens the boot of the car, briefcase, pulls out a .38. They make a break for it, I'm going to get him. Just think of what?
In the middle of the Cobby case, he had a gun in his boot.
He had a gun in the boot of his car, because he always carried a gun. He actually used to be a driver for a gangster before he became a reporter. So, I mean, that was one of the more light-hearted stories. As I said, to this day, I still talk to John, because we wrote the book 30 years later, And halfway through the book, again, I get emotional, he changed his name back to Cobby. He'd been John Francis, living under an alias because he didn't want anyone to know he was related. And he got his identity back. And now every time I ring him, he said, just tell me, I hope you're telling me that one of them's dead. I go, sorry, John. Although I did get to tell him Michael Murphy, one of the killers, was dead. And he was really happy.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the Cobby case. You know, it's...
Just take me back to that time. Like, you know, as you said, the Lilie James case in the past fortnight has rocked not only Sydney, a lot of the country. It's there's these incidents, aren't there, that we cover in our job, and
you think this is the worst for you? I mean, no, there's no. Everyone hates to rate murder.
I wouldn't be able to pick a worst. It's just one that strayed away. And do you know what it was? It was the phone call on that morning from a bloke telling me about it, just saying this is as bad as it gets. And you know when they're saying it, you go, wow. Yeah. You know, and I remember I was walking into Sunrise that morning to do TV about the shooting at Kirribilli.
Oh yeah, and that's the shooting you don't. I know it's hard to say. Like a gangster's shot at. Yeah. So it doesn't affect you, does it? Like,
no. You kind of go in there to talk about it, like we've talked about a lot of the other ones.
Yeah, and you're a little bit maroon. That doesn't hit you. Yeah.
And Matt Shervington, the new host on Sunrise, said, I guess your day will be busy now covering this shooting. And I said to him off air, I said, actually, mate, I said, something bad's just happened in the city. I said, they've found a girl's body. And he said, I just saw something about that. I said, yeah. And he goes, is it bad? I said, mate, I think this is going to be a big one. This is a really, really bad one. And he was like, wow. And he must have told his producer, because she called me outside, and in that time had taken a phone call who'd told me that it was, you know, two people who worked at the school. And so I think in that early moment, when somebody who, like us, deals with this regularly, unfortunately, you know, deals with crimes and tragedies of all kinds, when they go, this is a bad one, you go, oh, okay, we need to take this seriously.
It takes me back, like when we talk about Anita, and then you say, people, like I'm down there at the Goulburn Police Academy, not being able to cope with pulling out a gun on somebody, and then the things that they go through. And I remember with, again, Anita, as I said, it stood out because it was the first big case, I mean, I'd ever worked on. I got very close to first the Lynch family, then the coppers involved. And I'll tell you, there was one night where, again, we'd gone, was it during the court case, we'd gone back to the homicide squad drinking, and somebody said, I have the photos of Anita. And I wouldn't look at them. And I said, I don't need to. It wasn't until 30 years later, when I was writing the book, I had to look at them. And I can still see the fear in her eyes, frozen. And a couple of journos did, and then a couple of years later, there was another horrible murder. There was a murder of a 9-year-old schoolgirl. We were all out at a function, all cops and journos, and I remember Simon Boda again. Oh mate, I got to go. I've had too much to drink. And there was this manhunt for this killer, but we were all at this big function. He disappears, and I just keep drinking. And this copper comes up and he goes, "They've just got the killers for this girl, Penrith. So get a crew up there." Later, I said, "Why'd you tell me?" He said, "You didn't look at those photos." He said, "I didn't like it when those guys looked at the photos when they didn't need to." But then I did find out there was one copper who admitted, unfortunately to a journalist, and he shouldn't have, who wrote it, that after he was one of the first responders seeing her body, he couldn't have sex with his wife for a year or two. Such was the effect.
Wow.
So when you think about what those young coppers would have seen down there to this, I know that as I said, that was one reaction to the murder of Anita, and to this day, there's one or two who are still alive, the coppers I talk to, and they still can't get the image out of their head.
Why does it make you so emotional? Is it because you and I don't know if you feel this, but you kind of, there are cases that you cover where you get a real connection with the victim's family. And I had that covering the deaths of those 4 young kids at Oaklands, the Abdullah kids and their cousin. And you know, you went out there every day for a week.
And
we were there.
those people, they let you into their house, didn't they? They were people amazing, weren't they?
Yeah, they were beautiful people. And because of that, you feel that connection. And you know, I remember
Actually, I remember seeing you out there.
Yeah, we did. We did the first date out there together.
Yeah, you were on. Weren't you at the Mail out?
Yeah, I was at the Daily Mail.
No, and I was. Yeah,
you were here. It was that
I didn't realise you got that close to.
Yeah, and then you go to the funeral, and I kind of felt like I'd lost someone I knew.
Yeah.
And you know, as crazy as it may seem, is that how it was with Anita? And obviously, it's also having that connection with John.
It's more that. I don't think as I said, crack up now. But so John and I, I'll be really honest. John was protected. No one knew where he was, who he was. He'd changed his name, and a year later, after the case, the race to find the penultimate Cobby story was on. It's a horrible thing to say. I know if Cobby was on the front, the paper's circulation would skyrocket.
Wow.
It was just, Sydney was just, anyway. Through a dubious, dodgy means, somebody at the paper had found out how John had changed his name. He bribed somebody at basically the Department of Main Roads is what we call the licensing. Found him, knocked on his door. He wasn't home, his mother was. Left a card. He has rung me, because I was on the phone, shat himself. He said, how the fuck did you find me? What are you doing? You know, how do you know my real name? I said, mate, you got to talk to me, otherwise, you know, people will be on your doorstep. He said, who else knows? I said, no one now. It was I basically blackmailed him, in a way.
Yeah. And
I hate to say that. But we did the story with John, never used his real name, didn't show his face, and it was massive. And unbeknownst to me, I'm living at Bondi, John, he's living at Bronte, but through that series of stories I did with him, we became quite close because I wouldn't print certain things. And then I ran into him about 10 years later, as I said, on Bronte Beach, and we connected, and we'd run into each other. And I'd never written a book, and I'd say to him, what about the book? And he goes, no, not dancing on her grave, not dancing on her grave. And the 30th anniversary came around, and he said, you know what? There was some memorial going. He said, I'm sick of these people having memorials for Anita. And her parents were both dead by then. He said, I think we write the book. And during the course of writing the book, John poured everything out, and that's it. Yeah.
That must have been really hard for him, going through not only losing your wife, but going through what they were clearly going through together before it. Like you mentioned before, the blame that you put on yourself.
The weekend before they were together, talking about getting together, and he said, it's still my fault. I go, mate, it's 5 fucking animals' fault. It's got nothing to do with you. He said, I should have been there. And to this day, John will still blame himself. And he got a job. Remember, his name is John Francis, not John Cobby. And he was a nurse. And he got a job at Long Bay Jail as a nurse. And I said, you were going to kill him, weren't you? He said, no, it's just because it was close to home. I said, bullshit, John. Subconsciously, he said, well, he says he still has this dream where he walks into a courtroom and sprays them dead with a motorcycle helmet.
Wow.
And then we wrote the book, and I was allowed access to the file, and that's when I saw the photos. And I read the autopsy in full, I'd covered it so extensively, and I thought I knew so much.
Yeah.
But I didn't know the human toll. But the one thing that did come out of it was the birth of the Homicide Victim Support Group, which, again, another terrible murder. Ebony Simpson, 12-year-old girl, abducted, strangled, thrown in a pond before Anita. And then Gary Lynch, Anita's father, was talking to one of the coppers and said, how do I deal with this? He said, and he put him in touch with Peter Simpson, Ebony's father. Yeah. And they started saying people should talk. And that's where the Homicide Victim Support Group grew from. So that's now this great support group that's been around for a long time. So not very cheery, is it?
No.
And normally we crack jokes and stuff, but you're right, that story, I saw it affected you and Clem, and even the newsroom, you know.
The Lilie James story.
Yeah, the Lilie James story.
Yeah, it did. And I know there's been a bit of talk around, I don't know if you've seen it, but a bit around how we cover, you know, murders and whether we do it sensitively enough. And we talked a bit about it in last week's podcast with Clem. And, you know, even the fact that the cops were upset.
Yeah, I did. I heard,
to a degree.
I listened to it. Yeah, it was okay.
Yeah,
Wasn't bad.
You thought it was all right?
She handled herself okay. But yeah, she did. And yeah.
But I just think, you know, we do try. We do care, don't we?
We do.
We're not...
We really do. And I'm not having to go at you but more younger people. So now when a murder happens or a car accident or a death, like I had to go and knock on Anita Cobby's parents' door, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then face to face. That's the only way you got photos, the only way you got interviews. Now, like Lilie James, it's good and bad. Don't get me wrong, because without harassing those parents, we had a photo of her and we didn't have to knock. But likewise, I think some journalists don't get to have the empathy you get. You don't have to. I mean, you shit yourself. Going, fuck. What am I? You know, the Herald Sun used to call them intrusions, to, you know, the death knock. And I think nowadays, being able to just rip something off Facebook, and you know, especially some young journalists, you know, you don't get to know the empathy. You don't get to have the fear of what I'm doing, and to convey that to our readers. You need face to face, which you got with the Abdullah the family there.
It's interesting. I remember turning up on that morning of the morning after the Abdullah children had been killed, and
there's 4, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was 4, and at Beddington Road, it's this long road, and it kind of goes up the hill, and all the media were down the bottom where the crash had happened, and up on the corner at the time I arrived. Because the morning TVs had been doing their crosses, you know, and we knew 4 children were dead, and
I do. It's just
horrible. But up the top of this road, there was a group of adults, you know. Anyway, one of them was Danny Abdullah, the father of these children, and all the TVs were looking at them and kind of a bit, you know, standoffish. And I don't know why. I still don't know why I did it. I didn't know why I did it at the time, but there was just something where it was like, okay, this isn't the way to do things, right? It just kind of seemed like everyone was sitting there staring at this guy
who
lost his kids, and they were hugging him, and he was, you know, from a distance you kind of tell that he was approachable. And I actually said to Derek, who was working at the tally at the time, who's now one of our chief of staff, so I said to him, bugger this, mate. So I'm going to go ask him. And I just walked up and I said, Danny, I can't imagine what you're going through. I said, I'm so sorry for what's happened to you. I said, I'm not even going to try and pretend. I said, but everyone's standing down there. I said, if you want to say anything, come and tell me. I said, I'll get everyone together. We'll do it all as one. And that's it. You won't have to have people knocking on your door. You know, just
everyone's
different. The right thing. But he went. He said yeah. He said, give me 5 minutes. And I went down and I said, are you sure? He said, yeah. And I went down and said to all the guys, all the TV crew, said he's going to come down. And they went, what? I said, what do you mean? I said, we've just got to do it all as one. And said, let's just do it the right way.
And were you working for the Daily Mail then?
Yeah.
So why didn't you take him around the corner and say, no, he doesn't want to talk?
Wasn't the right thing to do.
No, and I'm trying to be light because I'm you know, But that is I'm telling you now, that's what the London Sun or somebody like that would have done.
The old days.
The old days. And good on you, seriously, for not trying to steal the story and for doing that.
But it was interesting too that he wanted to talk.
Yeah.
You know, I had another father, and people think, how can you knock on people's doors? That's horrible. Yeah. Some people want to talk. Yeah. They want to have their children, their loved ones, whatever it may be, remembered in the right way.
There are some people that don't want to do it, and knocking gangsters is not good fun. So,
no.
But you don't feel quite as intrusive. So
anyway, thanks for listening. It's been Crim City. I'm Josh Hanrahan.
I'm Mark Morri, and sorry it was a little bit grim this week. We just went there that way.
You don't have to apologise. Thank you for sharing your story.
Okay, thanks.